The instructor stops the class, not to correct someone, not to demonstrate a technique. She stops it specifically to point at you and say, in front of everyone, that what you just did was exactly right, that your form was perfect, that people should watch how you move through that sequence. 8 people turn to look at you, and something happens in your body that is not quite pride and not quite panic, but lands somewhere uncomfortably close to both. You laugh, a small, dismissive laugh that you didn't plan. You wave your hand, actually wave your hand in the direction of the compliment, as if you're shooing it away. You say something like, "Oh, I've been doing this for years, it's not that impressive," or, "I was actually just trying not to fall over." The instructor smiles and moves on. The class continues. And you spend the next 10 minutes not thinking about your form at all, but replaying the moment. Not the compliment, the thing you said after it. The way you deflected it so fast you barely felt it land. And somewhere underneath the mat, very quietly, why can't you just say thank you and mean it? Maybe for you, it's not a fitness class. Maybe it's someone telling you your cooking was incredible and you immediately listing everything that went wrong with it. A friend saying you look great and you redirecting to the shirt, the lighting, the fact that you're just well rested. A colleague calling your work excellent and you starting a sentence with, "It was really nothing, I just..." The compliment arrives, you step to the side. Every time. Stay with me. Because what's happening behind that sidestep is more interesting than politeness. Before we get into what's actually going on, can we clear something up first? This is not modesty, not real modesty anyway. Modesty is a choice. What you're doing is faster than a choice. It's a reflex. The deflection is already out of your mouth before you've had time to decide whether you wanted to say it. And it's not low self-esteem in the way people usually mean it. You're not walking around convinced you're worthless. You might be perfectly confident in most areas of your life. You just have this one very specific response to being seen, and it's the same every time. That's not a personality. That's a pattern. And the reason that distinction matters is that patterns have origins. Personalities just are. Patterns can be understood. And once you understand where this came from, it changes the way you hold it. So what's actually running underneath that reflex? Psychologist William Swann spent decades studying something called self-verification theory. The idea that people don't just seek positive feedback, they seek accurate feedback. Feedback that matches how they already see themselves. In other words, your brain isn't looking for the most flattering picture of you. It's looking for the most familiar one. And here's the part that actually explains the deflection. When a compliment lands and your internal self-image doesn't match what's being said, your brain doesn't celebrate. It flags it. Like a system receiving data it can't file. The compliment feels almost suspicious, too generous, like it was meant for someone slightly different from you. So you correct it. The laugh, the wave, the immediate qualification, that's not humility. That's your brain doing quality control on information it doesn't know what to do with. You're not rejecting it because it's wrong. You're rejecting it because it doesn't match the file. And that's only the surface of it. Because the self-image that's doing all this filtering, where did it come from in the first place? This is where it gets a little more personal. Researcher Harry Wallace and psychologist Diane Tice describe something called reflected appraisals, the way other people reflected us back to ourselves, especially early, especially consistently, tends to become the version of ourselves we trust most. Which means, if the feedback you received growing up was mostly critical, mostly conditional, or mostly absent, your brain built its self-image around that. Not because you decided to, because that was the data it had, and the brain trusts its own model. So when a compliment arrives that contradicts that model, it doesn't feel like good news. It feels like an error, like someone read the room wrong, or is being kind out of politeness, or simply doesn't know you well enough yet to see the full picture. Now here's the second layer, and this one is physical, not just psychological. Think about what actually happened in that room. 8 people turned to look at you, all at once, without warning. Being seen like that, suddenly, publicly, activates the same alert system your nervous system uses for exposure and vulnerability. It's not technically a threat, but your body doesn't always make that distinction. Researchers call this spotlight effect, the heightened self-consciousness that kicks in with unexpected visibility. The laugh, the deflection, the immediate minimizing, those aren't just social habits. They're your nervous system trying to shrink the spotlight back down to a size it can manage. The compliment didn't feel like a gift. It felt like exposure. Let's just appreciate what happened in that room for a second. Someone, a professional, in front of witnesses, told you that you were doing something right, specifically, out loud, and your immediate response was to disagree, politely, with a hand gesture. You essentially argued with a compliment. In a fitness class, in front of 8 people who had now forgotten about you entirely and were just trying to remember which foot goes where. And then you spent the rest of the session conducting a private internal tribunal about why the instructor was probably just being nice, or hadn't seen your left side, or was perhaps speaking to the person directly behind you. The case for the prosecution, 1 compliment. The case for the defense, years of compiled evidence that you have quietly been gathering for exactly this moment. It's an airtight case. You've been building it for a while. The wildest part? If someone in that class had struggled, you would have been the first to encourage them, genuinely, without keeping score. You're just not on the list of people you extend that to. Here's what's actually true. Not being able to receive a compliment is not a sign that you think too little of yourself. It's often a sign that you've been your own most rigorous critic for so long that kindness from the outside just doesn't have the right credentials. It doesn't feel like rejection, it feels like accuracy, like you're the only one in the room with the full information. People who deflect compliments are almost never careless or shallow. They're the ones paying the closest attention to their own flaws, their own gaps, every place where the reality doesn't quite match what someone is generously trying to say. They hold themselves to standards they would never impose on anyone else. They notice the one thing that went wrong in a room full of things that went right. Does any of that sound familiar? The cost is real. Moments of genuine recognition that you stepped around and can't get back. Relationships where people eventually stopped offering compliments, not because they stopped meaning them, but because the deflection started to feel like a wall, a low-level disconnection from your own accomplishments, because the good news never quite got through the filter. Why does it keep happening? Because accepting a compliment isn't just saying thank you, it's agreeing, for a moment, that someone else's view of you might be just as valid as your own. And if you've spent years building a very particular internal file case, that's a bigger ask than it sounds. But here's the thing. The instructor wasn't wrong. The colleague wasn't being polite. The friend wasn't confused. They were just seeing something you've been too close to notice. Letting it land isn't arrogance. It's just finally deciding the file might be wrong. If you watched this and spent at least part of it nodding slowly while slightly judging yourself, that's the right response. And also, very on brand for you. This channel is where we name the patterns that feel like personality quirks, but are actually just very old adaptations that forgot to check whether they're still needed. Before you close this, think of the last compliment you deflected. What did you say instead? Drop it in the comments. Not to perform vulnerability, just to see how creative we all get when we're trying to dodge being seen. You might be surprised how much company you have. And if this felt a bit too accurate, that's exactly what this channel is for. Subscribe because there are more patterns like this one, and they're all worth naming.
I'll see you in the next one.